I had to prepare something for Halloween, so here's the project that I have prepared for you. And I'm going to show you how to use image transfer to make beautiful beads, but I'm also going to show you how to use the scraps from previous image transfer projects. And I'm going to show you how to assemble this into your beautiful pendant with dangling elements. Hi, I'm Michaela from Learn Polymer Clay, and let's dive in. We'll start with the image transfer, and this is the image Roaring 20s with a Halloween black cat. And I've printed this image on my laser printer, and then I also prepared a sheet of white polymer clay passed on the setting number 4. I applied some rubbing alcohol, and this is my medium of choice for image transfer onto polymer clay. Then I flipped the image, I put it on top of the clay, and I used my fingers to gently tap on the image. Then I continued to rub the image into the polymer clay, and for image transfer, for beautiful image transfers, you'll have to take the time and burnish the image into the clay. You will notice at some point the paper fibers starting to come off, and sometimes I manage to get off larger paper elements, and sometimes I have to do it slowly. And then if needed, I might add more liquid. You can use water, you can use a little bit of rubbing alcohol as well, and continue removing the paper fibers until you clearly see the image transfer. Next, I'm going to show you how you can use previous image transfer scraps, and these are scraps from this project, and you'll find a link in the description for this project. And because I wanted to have some contrast in the resulting polymer clay piece, I rolled some black clay and I put 3 logs of black clay inside this scraps mixture, and then I just rolled everything into a log. And in fact, I'm going to use the Natasha technique to make a beautiful stone-like piece. And so I put everything into a log. I've also twisted a little bit the clay, and then I pressed on the sides and turned the log into a block of clay. The more you twist the clay, the more complex will be the resulting design. And then you'll just have to use your rigid blade and cut the clay in half, and you'll have to decide how you are going to join the two ends. In any case, you will have a mirror image, and this is, as I said, the Natasha technique. And this was the first design that I got with the Natasha technique, but then I felt that it lacked definition, and I decided to mix again the clay and do the Natasha technique once more, hoping for a better result. So if you don't like the first result of the Natasha technique, you can mix the clay again, and this time I twisted the clay a little bit more, and then again I used the rigid blade and cut the block of clay in half. Now I like this intricate pattern more. I think it was a good idea to add the black rolls for contrast. I really like how the colors pop because of the black insertions, of the black polymer clay insertions. Next, I prepared some black polymer clay that I passed through the setting number 4 of my Atlas pasta machine, and then I put it again through the pasta machine on top of a texture plate. And I'm going to use this textured clay to make the back of the piece. And then I put the Natasha, the piece created with the Natasha technique on top. I gently pressed the two pieces together, and then I'm going to use a triangle cutter to cut out the element for my pendant, and I really like the faux stone, the marble effect of the piece. Of course, you'll have to take the time to smooth off the edges, and I decided to use some black clay to cut borders for the piece. So I put the clay through the pasta machine on the setting number 4 again, and I'm just going to use the rigid blade and cut thin strips of clay that I'm going to use to make a border for the piece. I'm trimming the ends of the strips of clay, and then I'm just going to put them on top of the piece on the margins, and I'm using 3 strips and not only one longer strip of clay because I want to create an interesting pattern in the same time. So I'm trimming off the ends of the strips of clay, and I'm putting them, and I'm using them to cover the margins of the piece, and then I'm going to roll a little bit the ends to make an interesting looking frame for the bead. And then you'll just have to press these strips of clay into the base, and I'm using a sculpting tool to press the strips into the clay and to form an interesting round, to form a little bit the interesting round elements on the corners. I've also textured a little bit the strip of clay to make the frame even more interesting, and then I trimmed off one of the elements to make the upper elements pretty similar. So this is one element that I intend to use for the finished pendant. Now it's time to take care of the polymer clay with the image transfer on top. So again, I used a beautiful flower texture and some black polymer clay, and I put them together through the pasta machine on the largest setting. And I'm going to use this sheet of textured polymer clay to make the back of the bead. And this is the polymer clay with the image transfer. And in fact, this time I'm not going to use a cutter, I'm just going to use the flexible blade, and I'm going to cut around the design. So I'm taking advantage of the fact that this design has like an arch shape, and I'm going to just use the flexible blade and trim off the excess clay. Then I'm going to put the clay with the image transfer on top of the clay, of the textured clay. I'm going to use parchment paper to press everything together very gently. I don't want to distort the image transfer nor the texture back. And then I'm going to use a blade, a flexible blade, and trim off the excess clay. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to cut thin strips of clay to make a beautiful margin, like a frame for this piece. And I'm going to use this strip of polymer clay to make a frame for the piece. If your strip of clay is shorter than what you need to decorate the entire piece, you can gently pull on the clay and make the strip of clay long enough to decorate the entire piece all around. I'm trying to make an interesting outside decorative element for this frame as well. And then you'll just have to use your tools and gently press this decorative frame into the piece. And these are the 2 elements for the pendant. Now we need a connector element, and I'm just going to use some black polymer clay passed through the largest setting of the pasta machine on top of the same flower texture plate, and I cut out a rectangle, and I'm going to use a skewer to make a tube bead. So I'm wrapping the textured clay around the skewer. You'll just have to use the blade and trim off the excess clay. Then neatly join the 2 ends together, trim off the excess clay, Now I have to decide on the length of the tube bead, and I decided to trim off a little bit more, and then I put the skewer inside the tube bead, and I kind of pressed the tube bead against the two elements. So I pushed the clay upward to press the tube bead to the upper element, and then while rotating the skewer inside the tube bead, I also pushed the clay downwards to connect the tube bead to the second lower element. And then you'll just have to put these pieces connected, well connected, into the oven and bake the clay for 45 minutes in the preheated oven. I usually bake my pieces on parchment paper because we've made the back, the flower textured back in the same time, and I'm also tenting my pieces, meaning I'm putting an aluminum disposable pan on top to protect them from direct heat. You'll just have to let the clay cool down. And now it's time to apply UV resin for a very beautiful faux glass-like effect on top of the element decorated with the image transfer, and the image transfer will pop up even more and look even more beautiful after applying UV resin. I'm not going to apply UV resin on the Natasha technique, on the bead made with the Natasha technique, because you don't need to seal this piece, because I like it like that. I don't think it needs UV resin. And then after applying UV resin, you should check from the sides, make sure that you've covered the entire piece. Use a heat gun to remove any air bubbles, and use a UV lamp to cure the resin for 2 consecutive minutes. I'm using a fast curing UV lamp. And then I just put some silver color stainless steel chain through the tube bead. And for this design, I'm not making a pendant that sits close to the neck. It's rather a pendant that hangs low. So for this design, I'm going to use an arm's length of silver color stainless steel chain, and I've just put this chain through the tube bead, and then I use the jump ring to turn this into an attaching system. And this is a design that you just put on. You don't have any clasp to open. And then I use 20 gauge silver color wire to make an attaching system that will allow me to add 2 dangle elements on the sides of the image transfer bead. And I just used beading wire and beautiful crystal beads. And these are black glass beads with a little bit of bluish sparkle. And I've also used bicon beads and the drop bead. And I finished by attaching 3 seed beads. And then I just went through the beads and I've knotted the ends of the beading wire. Of course, I'm going to do the same thing on the other side of the image transfer bead. And I really like how these dangle elements move right and left when you are wearing the pendant. And I wanted these dangle elements to add more drama to the pendant. And I really like how this pendant turned out. Let me know in the comments if you like this idea for Halloween. Thank you for watching the tutorial. I hope you like my Halloween hat, and I hope you like this inspiration for your Halloween inspired pieces. If you like this idea, here's what to watch next.